Around 2 million people immigrated from Ireland during the Great Potato Famine, impacting America through social differences, religious conflict, and economic ups and downs. Although conflict arose as a result, there were many benefits and damages. This still echoes today. JFK was an Irish immigrant who led America. 34.5 million people that live in America today have Irish heritage. Ireland encountered many difficulties in the 1800s. First of all, there were the Acts of Union, which was when the English took over Ireland. Ireland then became a part of Great Britain in 1801. When the English came, they gave lots of land to Scottish farmers while insisting it could not be sold back to the Irishmen, preventing Irish from keeping their homeland. Most of the Irish were low class, working as farmers, workers, and servants. There had been lots of conflict with the English and Irish. When the English came over, they wanted the Irish to convert to their religion, Anglican. The Irish stayed true to what they believed in and stayed Catholic. There were many wars in the 1800s. The Tithe War was in 1830 to 1831, a war where Irish farmers had to pay tax to support the Protestant church. Yet the majority of the farmers were Catholic. They started to defy the law, and a war started. In the end, the price was reduced by a quarter. In 1869, an act called the Irish Church Act disabled the church. This led to the Great Potato Famine. This played a role in the Great Potato Famine because the British treated them poorly and showed that they were not a high priority going into the potato famine. In 1845, fog rolled in, killing potato crops, the main food source in Ireland, and eventually causing the deaths of 1 million Irishmen. The moist conditions caused the disease Phlythorian festans, an aggressive fungus that spread through Ireland's crops in a few days. This fungus affects the tuber of the plants, so the plant is unable to absorb nutrients. Since the main natural food resource was very scarce, food had to be imported, causing high prices and huge demand for basic food staples. Additionally, housing costs were very overpriced for poor structures owned by wealthy British landlords. This resulted in many people becoming homeless. As a result, the poverty rate drastically grew. The homeless had nothing. They huddled together in overcrowded conditions. With poor health and crowded conditions, many lethal diseases spread through the country, such as cholera, dropsy, dysentery, influenza, measles, relapsing fever, scurvy, tuberculosis, typhoid fever, and typhus. The illustration, digging for potatoes, shows how desperate many became. They dug and dug, hoping that they would come across potatoes to eat. Many people fled Ireland, moving to places like America and Scotland, while sending what they could back to their families in Ireland. When the Irish came to America, there were very different social statuses. The Irish were seen as poor and weak by the Americans and longed to be back in their homeland. This began conflict between the two ethnic groups. In a newspaper called the Harper's Weekly, there was a photograph. This cartoon shows Irish were not welcome in America because they were seen as very weak and unhealthy, depicted by a large boat saying, "Poor House from Galloway," and a smaller boat labeled, "From New York, the Dynamite," a threat to newcomers from the Americans. This is another photo in the Harper's Weekly. This could mean that the Irish were seen as if they had no voice, because the paper the woman is holding says help, and the rock says we are starving. Americans were worried that Irish would steal jobs and bring disease. This letter is from New York to Dublin. I'm a slave in the land of liberty. Nothing save death could lull in the storm which is raging in my mind. When I took out the prayer book in the chapel today, I thought my heart would break, not because it is weak, but friendless, deserted, and lonely. There are Irish volunteers preparing in America to invade Ireland in case of an emergency. My name is enrolled on the list, and we are drilling ourselves for the occasion. Perhaps I will return to Ireland with the green flag flying above me. I care not if it becomes my shroud. I have no regard for life while I am in exile. This shows many Irish grew lonely being away from their homeland and having Americans resent them because of their religion. Discrimination strengthened in the Irish communities and eventually strengthened America and its hold to value different cultures. There was conflict between the Catholics of Ireland and Protestants in America. Many got into fights that led to Catholic churches being burned down by Protestants. Catholics found their way into the United States cities, and verbal attacks often led to mob violence. For example, Protestants burned down St. Mary's Catholic Church in New York City in 18 1831, while in 1844 riots in Philadelphia left 13 dead. During this time, there were many anti-immigrant mobs that would start riots and take down many Irish. This put burdens on many. Children were also brought into this religious conflict. Anti-Catholic antagonization increased in the early 1840s, organized in part around perceived by the threat to the Bible in public schools. Catholic Bishop Francis Patrick Kendrick, an Irish immigrant himself, objected to the Protestant teachers leading students in singing Protestant hymns, requiring them to read from the King James Bibles. Discrimination against Catholicism and Irish traditions created large, strong Irish communities along the eastern U.S., such as Boston and Pittsburgh, because there were comfort in sharing the same traditions and values. But this also put burdens on communities because jobs were denied based on religion. The conflict between the two religions strengthened the Roman Catholic religion in America. Lastly, when immigrants came, there were many economic highs and lows. Irishmen took any unskilled jobs they could find, such as cleaning yards and stables, unloading ships, and pushing carts. And once again they fell victim to unscrupulous landlords. At this time it was Boston landlords who subdivided former Yankee dwellings into cheap houses, charging Irish families up to $150 a week to live in a single 9 by 11 foot room with no water, sanitation, ventilation, or daylight. When the Irish came, they would take any job. They were foreign to this new land and wanted to start their lives back up. This filled jobs, so America boomed with wealth. Many landlords grew wealthy when the Irish came, profiting America for the better. But on the downside, Americans were angry and worried that their jobs would be taken. With the Irish population rising so rapidly, this also damaged other Irish who came later within the potato famine period. With so many jobs taken, now the rest of the Irish became homeless. I've left the place, I was unemployed. They filled in business. I was out of the place all summer, the devil knows how long. This world is full of troubles. $100 worth of wood, which was what I had on the bank of the Arkansas River, to sell to the steamboats, but unfortunately the river overflowed its banks in April and took from me the labor of 6 months at least. One woman was unemployed while a man had lost half a year's of hard work and money. This benefits America, but because if it weren't for these new people coming in and taking jobs that no other would, it would have taken a longer time for America to grow its profit. The years remaining after the potato famine were just as big of a struggle. Ireland's population, almost 8.4 million in 1844, had fallen to 6.6 million by 1851. Hunger continued to be a problem for Ireland in the years after the famine. The poor lived as tenants at will, subject to the whim of the landlord. This shows that the economy still had not changed, and many were still struggling. In 1816, Irish nationalists launched the Easter Rising against British rule in Dublin. This rebellion was crushed, but widespread agitation for independence continued. This is significant because this is when the Irish understood that they needed to overrule the Brits. Civil war broke out even before the declaration of the Irish Free State on December 6, 1922, and ended with victory for the Irish Free State over Irish Republican forces in 1923. A constitution adopted by the Irish people in 1937 declared Ireland to be a sovereign, independent, democratic state. The Irish Free State was renamed Éire. This is when the people really decided to go through with their rights. They had to be heard. England did not do everything in its power to help Ireland during the disaster. If this had not happened, Ireland could still be part of England to this day. England could have directly imported food from different countries and chose the price to sell it at during the potato famine. Today in America, there are around 34.5 million people who have Irish heritage. Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania currently have the largest Irish population in America at 16.74%, followed by Boston, Massachusetts, with 15.8%. One of our most famous leaders had Irish roots. President John F. Kennedy, our 35th American president, was Irish Catholic. The F in John F. Kennedy's name stood for Fitzgerald, which was his mother's maiden name. The family came from Ireland during 1846 and 1855, fleeing the Great Potato Famine. The Fitzgeralds arrived in Boston, Massachusetts, to be with relatives, and a few generations later, JFK was born. Another influential Irish leader was Mary Harris, Mother Jones. She was born in Cork, the Republic of Ireland. As a young girl, she saw the devastating effects of the potato famine and fled. In America, she helped organize protests and strikes to rally and represent workers for better pay and safer work conditions. She was the co-founder of the Industrial Workers of the World, which still exists today. This group gives workers a voice. These people have changed and shaped America for the better and still inspire us today.